Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, or welcome if you're new to my channel. So, the movie we're going to take a look at today, of course, from 1981, as part of my overall 1980s horror series, is a movie that I streamed off YouTube. I don't have the physical media of this movie, and that movie is The Pit, also known as Teddy, a Canadian horror film from 1981. So, let's just go ahead and talk about The Pit. The Pit, also known as Teddy, is a 1981 Canadian horror film starring Sammy Snyders and Janine Elias. Although it's a Canadian production, it was actually filmed in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. The Pit itself was filmed in Waupun, Wisconsin, which I'm familiar with both those areas because Wisconsin's my state. So that was kind of an interesting tidbit watching this movie and realizing that. Jamie Benjamin is a misfit 12-year-old boy from Toronto, Canada. He's the Canadian born whipping boy of his classmates, the other kids in the city, and the grandmothers who live in Wisconsin. When he encounters other people, they tease and ridicule him. His only friend is a stuffed bear named Teddy, with whom he regularly holds conversations. The audience hears Teddy's voice as he talks to Jamie. On the cusp of puberty, Jamie develops an unhealthy obsession with girls. Thus, when his parents go away on a business trip and leave the attractive psychology student Sandy O'Reilly to babysit him, he falls completely in love with her. His lust for her is first revealed when he drops his napkin at the dinner table, and when he reaches for it, he uses the opportunity to look at Sandy's panties. During one of his conversations with Sandy, Jamie asks her if she can keep a secret. Jamie reveals that in the forest he has found a pit of mysterious creatures, which he calls trogs, which he takes care of by feeding them raw meat. So that's kind of the setup and the premise, the beginning of this movie. As far as the cast goes, we have Sammy Snyders as Jamie Benjamin, Janine Elias as Sandy O'Reilly, Sonia Smits as Mrs. Lind, Laura Hollingsworth as Marge Livingstone, Richard Alden as Mr. Benjamin, and Laura Press as Mrs. Benjamin. So, yeah, that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for the 1981 Canadian horror film The Pit. Um, this movie's pretty ridiculous if I'm being honest about it. I know it's kind of a cult favorite, and I guess if you view it as like a B horror movie from that time frame, it's certainly watchable and not the worst thing in the world. But man, it's pretty crazy. So let's just go ahead and get started with the things that I like about the movie, the pros. I will say, obviously, it does have a very unique and weirdly different idea or story going on here. On one hand, you got the strange, messed up kid doing bad things based on what his teddy bear tells him, while also overseeing and being the only one that knows about this pit of trogs that he discovered. I dare you to find another movie that's similar to that in any time frame. So I give him credit for that. I mean, this isn't a standard horror movie by any stretch of the imagination. I thought the performance of the kid, actually, Sammy Snyders, who plays Jamie, was actually pretty well done as a kid performance. He really sells the character as a believable, disturbed, and odd young boy approaching puberty. I didn't find a false note anywhere with his performance. And again, a lot of times you get these young performers, you don't know what to expect, or we've had some good child performances and some really bad child performances, and a lot of time they're just uneven and not that good. But I thought he did a good job here, and I don't know that if he was in anything else. I haven't really looked at his IBD. I haven't looked at his background as far as TV or movies or his career. What else he's done besides this? But yeah, I thought he did a good job. And if that character doesn't work, if that performance doesn't sell it for you, then the movie's really going to fall flat on its face, even more so than it already does, in my opinion. The movie does have that sort of early '80s cheesy feel and charm to it that makes it more watchable than it should be. I'm not going to say makes it better than it should be, but it certainly does make it more watchable than it should be, just based on the premise and how they execute the movie. So it does have that '80s charm and cheese. The look of the trogs was interesting and fairly effective, more so when the trogs are still down in the pit, and especially for the time that this was made, late '70s, early '80s. But when the trogs are down in the pit before they end up coming out towards the end and walking around, but I thought their eyes and their faces were kind of cool looking. I mean, it's nothing great, nothing like phenomenal, but I thought it was pretty effective for this movie. And as I said, for a B horror movie in the time that it was done, I like the way the movie opens with the flash forward scene that we get to sort of get the viewer the idea of question kind of what this movie's going to be all about. I thought that was an effective way to open the movie. Then we see it later in the movie, in real time, but it's a flash forward scene at the very beginning, and then we kind of go back to the how we got there, basically one of those kind of deals. So um I also like the POV of the trogs where they're looking up out of this pit where they see things like as color coded and kind of blurry through their eyes. Not surprisingly, the color of their eyes. um that you also see that too a little bit, their point of view when they're out of the pit, and they're sort of stalking people outside. And then finally, I thought the very end of the movie has a really nice full circle sequence to it, both in terms of our main character of Jamie sort of getting his just due, as well as the fact that there's more trogs out there. They haven't been captured or discovered. There's other pits out there. I don't know. I just thought that was a pretty interesting way to end the movie, and then, like I said, having to do with the main character of Jamie, who's kind of a little jerk. Let's face it, and kind of had some comeuppance coming to him. The movie does have some nudity too. I'll mention that for those of you that look for '80s horror movies to give you some nudity. There is nudity in this movie having to do with a shower and uh, kind of a forced hostage situation where a character shows some nudity to get her niece back. She's kind of tricked into that. So yeah, there's a little nudity out there for those of you that are looking for that. So those are my pros for the pit. Getting into cons, it's really about the execution of the movie. Mainly the pacing of the movie, I think, is really off here. And I think it has a lot more to do with the movie being too long overall, and also having too many different story ideas and things that they try to combine into one movie unsuccessfully. Also, some of the earlier scenes in the movie drag on longer than they need to. This movie, I think, was it like 100, and it's basically 101 minutes, I think, in running time, and I think it should have been more like 81 or 91 possibly, but somewhere between 81 and 91 minutes. And I think you would have had a more effective movie than what you ended up getting. It's just, I don't know. I was checking my watch a bit watching it. It's not the most action packed movie either, but I just felt that they could have edited it better. There were scenes they could have done without. They could have shortened them up a bit. So yeah, the pacing is really off in this movie, as well as having these different ideas, because at one point it focuses on the kid and all of his misgivings and what he's doing. And then, like, the third act of the movie is all about the Trogs getting out of this pit by the kid, and all of a sudden you're introduced to this police officer and his lieutenant or whatever, and they're trying to track him down where you don't even see the kid. So it's kind of like you have a couple different movies going on at the same time in this movie, and it just didn't work for me. That's really the biggest con I can give. I never really understood the tone of the movie as a result of what they were going for, because at times the movie tries to play it straight and tries to have a more serious tone. And then at other times, like when you get to the cops in the third act, it has more of a comedic feel and tone to it. It never really struck the right balance there. Rather made it hard to stay involved in, frankly, for me. And again, it says it's a horror film. It doesn't say anything about like a comedy horror or horror comedy. So that really threw me off. The tone was never right in this movie, and neither was the pacing, as I said. The way the characters fall and jump, etc., into this pit is pretty laughable. Not all that convincing. Um, some of them, like how they don't see the pit and they just jump into it or they fall into it, is beyond me. It's part of the cheesiness, though, I guess, that the movie does have, that early '80s cheese. And speaking of that, most of the characters are pretty badly acted in this movie. You have bad dialogue. They make decisions that are hard to get behind. Like I said, a lot of it having to do with this pit or, um, you know, and then finally, as I mentioned, the editing, the cinematography definitely seems very B movie. Nothing great, nothing nothing great about either one of them. And the overall music and score is very cheesy and not at all creepy or intimidating to make this movie scary or creepy. And the kills are mostly off screen. Not a ton of blood or gore is shown on screen related to the kills. There is some blood in one of the main characters' death later on in the movie in the pit, but otherwise, there really isn't much going on here in the way of gore or kills. Um, so yeah, I don't know, guys. The Pit is an okay early '80s movie. It's certainly not winning any awards, and I'm certainly not going to rush out to buy it on physical media, especially when I went to eBay just to check it out and see that it's basically 15, $20. I'm sure it's been out of print for a while, which is why. But I'm not paying. I would pay maybe $3 or $4 for this, but I'm not paying 15 or 20. It's not that good a movie, in my opinion, and I can kind of see why it has a bit of a cult following as a B horror movie from 1981. But I don't know, guys. It's not. It's a movie that I'd probably rewatch a couple years down the road. But I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's certainly not great or even good in certain areas. As I said, the pacing and the tone really throw me off. But I do give credit to the kid, the actor that plays the main character here. But I just don't know. They just didn't effectively execute this movie. That's the bottom line. So 6.5 out of 10 for The Pit from 1981. Go ahead and comment down below if you guys have seen this movie, what you think of it. Do you like it more or less? Why not? Please like this video, hit the little notification bell, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. Got a long ways to go, many movies for 1981 to look at. But also, you don't want to miss my other great horror content that I have coming out, including in March and May and beyond. So, with all that being said, I hope you guys are enjoying this review series. Hope you're doing well, and as always, stay scared. Bye.